back to the podcast. So we are kind of in a transitionary period. So my class is going to start in about a month at Greensboro College, but I've got at least 2 podcast episodes lined up before then. And don't worry, I think I'm going to get my studio set up eventually in my new place. But today we are going to have a conversation with my student Craig and Terell, who is a VP within the banking sector. And just found out that he actually doesn't have a college degree. So I think we're going to dig into that topic quite a bit because I see, a ton of YouTube videos and posts about, do you need a degree or do you not? So that's going to be really fascinating for us to dig into. All right, so let me go ahead and pull him in. How's it going?
It's going good, John. How are you on this lovely Friday?
I'm good. I got a workout in. I've started doing legs like right in the middle of the day. So like my lunch break, I go to the gym and lift. Nice. If I do squats at like 6 p.m. after I just can't sleep. So you've been a long time follower of the podcast. Let me thank you for boosting my signal. I feel like every time I post, you're right there liking and engaging.
Oh, no problem. I'm a huge fan. I think podcasts like these are always interesting. I love hearing from other folks within the industry, but I also like hearing about incoming talent as well. So your podcast kind of gives a nice mix of both. I can talk to folks already established and folks up and coming up the pipeline. So it's really cool.
Gotcha. All right. So you want to give us your Batman origin story then?
Sure. So went to high school like everyone else. I was getting ready to graduate. I had a classmate whose father at the time worked for J.P. Morgan Chase. So he was kind of impressed with me as a student in high school, seeing me interact in different things. The school I went to, we did things differently. It was project-based learning, so we did a lot of different projects, competed in competitions both locally and nationally. There was a lot of presenting, so it was a more real-world learning environment. While we had basic tests like any other school, we also did more projects, so you kind of saw what we learned, just like we do at the job, right? You don't take tests at your job, you produce stuff. So that's what we kind of did. And so he saw some potential in me, and so I got to meet with a bunch of other folks at Chase. I had a whole day where I met a bunch of them, and so that led the summer after I graduated high school, got an interview for a phone position. So that's actually I started on phones. Fresh out of high school, I was a customer support specialist, helping people with loan modifications, people trying to modify their mortgage loan. And so I was started on the phone there. And so I did that for about a year and some change. And then after that, an opportunity came up to start working on some strategic initiatives. So I got moved straight from the phones to work with this other guy. I was like his one employee. I pretty much just helped him with whatever he needed, which looking back really amounted to a bunch of entry-level BA work. I was working with Excel, doing pivot tables, running meetings, taking notes, doing a lot of diagnostic analytics. So while I wasn't running reports or creating reports, I would do a lot of deep diving into the data, trying to see what was going on. Since I came from the phones, I understood the business, so I could look at the report and say, oh, that's not right. Here's why, or this logic doesn't make sense. Here's why. Oh, we don't do that. This is how we actually do things. So
you got on the front lines.
Yeah.
So you understand the business from the ground up. Correct. Which, the listeners, if you haven't seen on LinkedIn, so I just accepted a full-time position at the Fresh Market. And I've noticed within my department, you either have an MBA and you have kind of the business, you get into that position through your like technical skills and education, or you've worked 16 years, starting as a cashier and moving up to, I don't know, the bakery and the manager. Right. And it's interesting because it seems like that is such a low risk approach in that a lot of people are getting into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and there's no guarantee, once you get a bachelor's degree or a master's. Actually, I literally at the gym today, I ran into a guy and he had just finished up a CS degree at UNCG, and he was like, he had gotten like a kind of a lame job that he wasn't that excited about. And it's like he's got a master's degree, but he has no relevant work experience. So it's like, it's kind of tough. But that's cool because I'm starting to, now that I'm working full time, I'm kind of, I feel like I have a better ability to empathize.
Yeah.
Like me running the consulting agency the past 8 years, I'm not like having to deal with,
Right.
managers, corporate structure, politics. But yeah, I'm learning a completely different side of things right now.
No, for sure. You definitely see that. And that's, I did that entry level work as for strategic initiatives within the department. It was all default servicing. And then being in a big company, we do tons of restructuring from time to time. So through a giant reorg of moving different leaders around, I ended up on a team of business intelligence analysts. So what we did then is we supported the default service department, collections, modifications, short sales, and eventually customer service even. And so we just did all the analytical support. So that's where my technical skills started to more so develop. I learned more Excel, I learned SQL, I learned Tableau. And so then I was there for about total at time at Chase, I spent 4.5 years. So I spent about 3.5 years in that analyst role. I was the entry level analyst. I moved to the next level of analyst. And then eventually I spread my wings, decided to take a lot of those technical skills. To your point, once you learn the technical skills with experience, well, now more jobs open up. You're able to kind of apply, you're able to do different things. So then I went to Caliber Home Loans, so staying within mortgage, but this time on the vendor management side. So now I was doing reporting on like contracts and head count, trying to keep track of all the different vendors we use there. And
Wait, can I pause you there? I got a question.
Yeah.
I think this is a good one. How did you find that opportunity? Did you apply? Did you cold apply, or did you get introduced?
I applied via LinkedIn. Yeah, I found a lot of jobs.
Interesting, because my understanding was that most analyst jobs use an applicant tracking system that if you don't have a degree, it just filters your resume out. So that interesting. Okay.
No, I didn't get filtered out. I didn't get the ATF didn't discriminate against me.
I mean, it's silly, and I'm not in support of that at all. But yeah, it's like you could either hire somebody who has zero experience and a college degree, or you, but they're not even seeing your resume because you don't.
For sure.
The education department, yeah.
Well, for sure. And so they thankfully I got through, which was nice, and then was able to use the business knowledge before that I had from my prior role, plus the new technical skills that I had to kind of sell myself into that position. So I did that for about a year. Now, I knew when I got out of high school, I always wanted to eventually get into management. I knew management, leadership. I enjoy developing other people. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy seeing people succeed. That's why I've even enjoyed your podcast, because it's another example of, trying to help others, because that's what we should do, right? No one gets anywhere without anybody. I just told you someone helped me get a shot. So who am I to now say, gatekeep and say, no, you don't come in here. I don't care what. Who am I, right? So
you don't want to pull the ladder up.
Right, exactly. So I knew I want to get into management. So after a year there, I applied for some different managerial roles, and that's where I ended up with the VP job I have now at another financial institution. So that's been nice. I lead a small team of analysts, and we now take care of a lot of control reporting for our department. So it's been a fun journey so far.
That's awesome. All right. So one topic that I wanted to delve into is, you mentioned in our pre-podcast chat that you're actively developing an analyst to go from entry level to senior. Mm-hmm. Tell me all about that, please.
Yeah, sure. So, I think to your point, right? Sometimes there's kind of almost a gap, if you will, when it comes to the whole degree situation, because neither rule is 100% true. So if you get everyone with a degree, doesn't mean they all fit. Also doesn't mean that everyone without a degree doesn't fit. On that same token, there are some people who don't have a degree that probably do not fit. And there's some people who have a degree who fit perfectly, right? Neither one is a zero-sum game. So sometimes you find different people who can have the master's and they're stuck out looking for the role. And you got people who, don't have a degree but could fit a role and they never get the opportunity. So you kind of have these gaps on either side. And that's what I've observed, experienced, and just noticed in general in my time in the corporate sector, right? And so I have this analyst that I kind of inherited through an org change. A bunch of org changes happened, kind of ended up on my team. And it was kind of like, okay, well, what type of work have you done before? Okay, you've done this and this. What have you been doing lately? Okay, well, that's kind of some entry-level analyst stuff. Okay, we can work with this because you know the business well. You understand what's going on. You're on my team now. So, you've been kind of told you're going to that team. They do reporting. You've been doing reporting. You're going over there now. So similar to what happened to me, right? I was doing strategic initiatives, doing entry-level BA work. I got swept up in an org change onto a new team. I was there. I'm already part of the company. And so I use that to grow to where I grew. And so now I'm trying to do the exact same thing, different thing, taking down the same path. Hey, let's work on the Excel skills. Let's talk about SQL. Let's talk about Tableau. Let's build up from the ground up. Use the business knowledge that you have. Use the knowledge, the institutional knowledge, right? And that can't be bought because no doubt, as you're seeing as your new job, you're learning how they work. It doesn't matter your experience. You may understand basic principles of business, of course, having a degree, which is important, but specifically how they do business, you until you get there. That's for any company in industry. So trying to utilize a lot of the institutional knowledge that analyst has to make up the difference in the meantime while we kind of short those technical skills. So far, he's gone from a junior analyst. He's now kind of in the intermediate range. So now we're trying to move from the intermediate range to the more senior range. But it's been going good so far. It's been cool to see.
Yeah, speaking of that, so on LinkedIn, Hunter, former podcast co-host, just he went from junior financial analyst to a promotion as financial analyst.
Yeah.
And we're going to be seeing him on Wednesday. So that's going to be a ton of fun. Okay. One question I've got is, why did you choose that specific person to develop?
So to be honest, I'm pro development no matter who it happens to be.
Okay.
And so I have a senior analyst on my team. I'm developing him as well to kind of align to kind of his strengths. He could go to a further higher IC role or in a management role. So we're evaluating what do you enjoy doing. That's really what it determines, right? If you love the technical stuff, higher level IC roles the route. If you enjoy the people aspect and some HR paperwork, then it may be the management will fly, right? But I just enjoy developing people. So for him, it was kind of, you're on my team, you're going to get developed. Whether I inherit you, whether I hire you, if you're on this team, if you're on Team Tyson, we're going to be a developmental team. Because to me, I want you to succeed, one, on the team so the team does well. But more importantly, I want you to do well regardless, whether you're on a different team in this company, a different company. I want you to look back and say you were better for being on this team versus you spent 6 months, a year, however many years, and it was a waste. Because that reflects on me as a leader, right? Like my job is to lead and help. So I'm pro development because I want you to be great wherever you go. And hopefully you can say I'm great because I had a great manager and he took the time and did and now I'm killing it. I want that to be, because then that helps people want to join the team. Who wants to go on a team where you're right.
So it kind of gets into company culture and then also like your management style. Because I talked about this in I did just a talking head video talking about my experience getting this job. And one thing I realized is that I had 2 back-to-back bad managers when I was interning during my MBA. The first one was he was almost like trying to be like this big shot.
Yeah.
And a prime example of this, he was like, I'm going to take you out to lunch. He was on his phone the entire time. He didn't even look at it. Was like being on a bad date. It was really weird. And it was all about looking impressive, but not being. And he didn't help me at all. And then the second one, there was a language barrier. He spoke English as a second language and had a stutter.
Gotcha.
I couldn't understand what he said.
Right.
And we had a kind of our first meeting, and then he expected me to have a deliverable, and I didn't have the kind of social intelligence that I do now to be able to say, hey, you got to slow down, or hey, is it right. But he sat me down, going into that second meeting, he said, this is the quality work of a high schooler in Sweden.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is that's mega harsh, right?
Your confidence shattered.
And it's that's the second me. Yeah. And I realize both of those are pretty atypical. I think most managers are more on your speed and that they want to help.
Yeah.
They get into management because they want to develop people. They like people. They're social. There are very few people that climb the corporate ladder who are sociopaths, I think.
Sure. No.
Politicians for sure, I think I heard somebody say you have to be somewhat psychopathic to want to be the president.
Well, and that's the gap sometimes when it comes to the managerial side, which I guess you could make a whole episode just on that. But I always compare it to sales. Just because someone has the highest sales number does not mean they should be the sales manager. But oftentimes, what do we reward? We say, you're killing sales. You're leading every quarter. You're the manager. He may be a terrible manager. Might be a terrible people person, terrible teacher, does not need to be. But sometimes and I think sometimes in analytics is the same thing. We can say, oh man, they're great at coding, they're great at these projects, they can kill a deadline. You're management, and that's not always the case. High skill there doesn't equal high leader. And I think sometimes, just like it's a gap sometimes.
There's a term for that, right?
There is, and it's escaping me. So
it's
I'm
called
sure
the Peters principle.
It's what?
The Peters principle.
Ah.
So you were promoted to your level of incompetence.
Right.
Everyone that's in a leadership position is bad at their job. Right. They were good analysts, and then they were good senior analysts, but they're a bad manager. Yeah, it's interesting that the being good at your current job doesn't make you good at being up the ladder. It's a completely different skill set. You gotta be able to read the room and build relationships and get buy-in from people, which is totally different than I'm going to spend 8 hours on this Excel project. Like that.
Completely different.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. So anything else? Anything else that you want to touch on about? So you're currently a VP, right?
Yes.
What is that like day to day, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. So each day can be a little different. I think there's some days where you have meetings with different stakeholders to say, hey, how's this performing? How's this working? What else do you need from me, if anything? Or, hey, here's a new idea of something we can roll out. Right. There's times where it's meeting with the team to say, hey, how are these different deliverables coming? Are there any things that I can do to help support you? Perhaps you have a question on how to do something in Tableau. I can help you with that. Or perhaps it's, hey, I really need your help with, I'm dealing with a partner and it's not working well. Can you kind of step in? Sure, I can have that conversation. Or I got this request while I was working on this other deliverable. Which one should I do? Work on this one instead, helping with the priority setting. So it kind of depends on the day and the time of the month, because if it's a month or a time of month where we have some month-end deliverables, well, now it's all hands on deck. It's approving things, it's proofreading things, it's doing that quality control. Hey, we got to send this out. Let me review it. It doesn't look good. Okay, cool. Kind of like Gordon Ramsay Hell's Kitchen, right? You're monitoring the pass. Okay, send that to table 5. Okay, this is great. Send this to table 2. So each day can be a little different, but it's a lot of trying to galvanize the troops to kind of do our service well, but also doing it with a smile so people enjoy working with us and they don't hate working with us. We try to play nice in the sandbox. I'm like,
So you're a technical manager then?
A little bit.
You actually know how the tech works. So have you ever heard that show, Mr. Robot? That's about the hacker.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, I was rewatching season 1 and a bunch of executives came in, and I mean, this was back, I think it was 10 years ago, but the head of IT had a BlackBerry, and he was like, of course, they have no idea about technology, because I've heard that's a debate of, should you be better at the people management and less on the technical side? Like, you should lean on your team. I mean, the risk there seems pretty big of if you don't understand what you're managing, it feels like you're opening yourself up to quite a bit of risk.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's the balance where the manager has to figure out what fits for the team, because each team might be different. If for me, I have a small team, so me being a technical leader in some ways is important. So I may have to get my hands dirty. If you have some massive team where let's say you got 20, 30 people, you probably could get away with someone who's just a good leader and then can just make sure that they know. So I think goes to that next level of leadership of how you're building out your organization. Yeah. And does it make sense to what type of leader do I need in each spot? Because to your point, you may need a different leader depending on what the situation is. And you have to be mindful enough to know the difference, which goes back to what we talked about before with the whole degree, no degree thing. The degree, no degree doesn't guarantee any of those things. In fact, it's got nothing to do with that. It's more of a conversation. What's their style? How do they think? How do they move? And you tend to need to have one of these conversations to figure that out.
Right. So I think I just had an idea that popped in my head. I think I know what you should put in your education system or a portion of your LinkedIn. Yeah. You should say, I went to the School of Hard Knocks. Because I bet you being on the phone, I bet people were yelling at you.
Oh, yeah.
Customer.
Oh, I got cussed out plenty of times. I got threats. I got all sorts of stories about that, John. That's a whole, I got plenty of stories about that. Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, I wanted to circle back around to the reason I asked you about the analysts that you're developing, did they stand out in a particular way? Is that so? I guess this is a whole kind of segue into. I've joined an analytics development program put on by Solomon Khan, who is the former VP of Nielsen in their analytics department. And we are actually we're on a call earlier today talking about like social media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was we were talking through content ideas, and like one of the things that I did recently this week at work specifically is I went up to one of the senior leaders that's I'm in the merchandising department, so he's the VP of merchandising, and I went up and talked to him and said, hey, I'm trying to get my head around the business. Do you have any like recommendations on books that can help me understand how things work?
Right.
And he didn't have anything industry specific, but he did say that he's a real big fan of Stephen Covey, who wrote the book Seven
Habits book.
Highly.
Yeah.
So I was talking to Solomon about this, my mentor, and he told me on Tuesday, at Thursday I ran into, and I was like, oh, I just finished the first chapter. I'd love to chat with you about this more. And what's interesting is that we then had a meeting with like the whole department, and we're going over this plan. And then he ended the call by saying, John David, what do you think about this? Do we get your approval? Like, the thing is, like, obviously I'm 6 weeks in, so like, of course I have no idea what's going on.
Right.
But, like, I think what's significant about that is the visibility. I feel like a lot of people just kind of toil. They feel like if I'm really good at my job and I'm going to get promoted, or I'm going to, have good things come to me. But there's a certain aspect of, I don't even know, what would you call that? Just like relationship building?
I know what you're saying. I think you're right. I think, and maybe that is what made me want to help out the junior analyst even more so, because I think sometimes you can get stuck, and I think it comes down to we don't have these honest conversations, right? We don't have the honest conversation to say, hey, you could be great at doing your job, and you could do great every year, but just because you do great every year does not mean we will promote you. We will keep paying you and keep you hired if you're doing what we hired you for. But when it comes to moving forward, you may need to do a little more, right, above and beyond to say, we'll promote you. You may need some visibility for the people above me who approve promotions to know that you exist, right? Because they may not care about you doing the BAU. So I think you're right. I think there is that visibility, that relationship building, and sometimes you need a champion, right? You need someone who can speak for you in the rooms you don't get to go in, because everyone has rooms that they're not going to go in for whatever reason. It doesn't matter the size of the organization. There's certain rooms you're not going to get to. So you need someone who's in those rooms to speak up for you, whether it's they know your work, they know your potential, whether you've done work that benefits them directly, whatever it is, you need them to bring you up in there. That's where decisions get made. Because the decision very rarely gets made just between you and your direct manager. It usually goes much higher than that oftentimes. Right.
Well, and so I was telling Solomon that story about like that would be a good LinkedIn post idea, and he was like, you would be shocked at how many people came up to him as the VP and asked for advice and then didn't take it. He was like, just the fact, it's a surprisingly low bar. I give you advice and then you take it and then you comment on it.
Right.
All of a sudden you're put into like a different category of like, oh, this person's with it.
Right.
I don't even know. What would you, I guess that would be like conscientiousness or like.
It's like a humbleness, right? It's a teachableness. You have to have some form of teachability. We'll make up a word today. You need some form of teachability to where if someone talks to you, spends time with you, you listen, right? Because sometimes, and I guess that's where the networking thing comes into play. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm going to meet you, and I just want something from you versus I just want to learn from you, right? I can't walk up to you and say, give me a job. But if I come up and say, give me advice, and then I start to use it, well, now we're developing, you're actually trying to help me versus just, I need the immediate payoff. Because most people, they'll work with someone long term, but just for the immediate payoff, I just met you, you want a job, probably not going to happen. But we develop a relationship of I'm trying to help you. Once you're ready, right, then I can say, hey, so and so needs to be here or here, whatever whatever the case may be.
Right. I mean, not to get too meta, but if you think about this podcast, that's the whole platform. Like I'm helping people. You're helping me help people. Yeah. And that makes you feel good. So you get something out of it. Also too, like I think it's somewhat flattering for someone to be like, I want to hear you talk about yourself.
Of course.
People love to talk about themselves.
Well, hey, you would have no podcast episodes if people didn't.
Yeah, going back in time, I should have just done solo episodes, me talking about me. And
that makes a difference. People love to learn about people because you get a variety of circumstances and situations where people cannot identify. There may be someone identifies with one person over the next, and that's why hearing someone's story helps them because 8 billion people on the planet. There's a lot of similarities, more so than different.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, let's go ahead and pull Craig in. So, we got to rearrange this a little bit. Craig.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Craig.
Doing all right. So, I reached out to my students to see who was interested in kind of the banking sector, and Craig got back to me and was like, yeah, this is something I'm interested in potentially pursuing. So I'm going to let you guys talk, maybe facilitate a little bit, but Craig, I'm sure you've got questions.
Yeah, I've got a ton of questions. And I'm interested in banking for sure. When I was in high school, I really started to get involved in my family's business around the time that I was 15 or 16. And that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of learning a lot about finance and about the stock market. When I was in high school, I read a lot of books about like technical analysis and fundamental analysis and that kind of stuff, which I thought was really interesting. And I always have been kind of a math guy.
Yeah.
And then when I was in college, I got the opportunity to pick up the data analytic or the business analytics minor at GC, which definitely so far has been great. Yeah. Okay. It's changed my life. Sure. I would have graduated by now if I hadn't picked up that minus. I'm sure it's changed my life.
Yeah. It's all for the worst. Not kidding.
But picking that up has definitely taught me a lot of what I think are probably more literal skills. I would not have learned Power BI. I guess I was pretty good at Excel, but I started to get a lot better at Excel when I started taking those classes. And I ended up getting an internship doing analytics. So I probably never would have done that if I had never picked that up. My internship was not in the banking sector, but that's how it goes. I tried. I applied to a bunch of different ones, but it's okay. And
so let me pause you there, Craig. You were light years ahead of me when I was your age, because like he's Craig. You're already starting to think strategically in that you've got this internship with this company, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing some Python so that they need me to run this because no one on the team knows this stuff. So like you've got that higher level strategic thinking going on, which like when I was your age, I was just like, where's the party tonight? And so and also too, you've got an incredibly hard work ethic. Like you're like training super hard, straight A student, and also like starting to kind of feel out a little bit your future, and internships are a great way of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, really flattering. I'd like to think I have a hard work ethic. But seriously, from my perspective, the way I think about it is if you're the type of person that really wants to be successful, you just need to kind of get your foot in the door.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, they look at these applications on LinkedIn and they're like, well, this application wants me to know Power BI or wants me to know Power Automate or Python. And I just don't really know any of that. So I can't really apply. And the reality is whatever job, because I've worked a ton of jobs, and most jobs you need to have an idea of how that program works. But when you get into that job, they're going to teach you how they do it, Yeah. So I've been really trying to cast a wide net and learn as many different things as I can while I still am young and have the brain flexibility to just learn a bunch of new stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And keep working out too. So keep your brain neuroplastic, and also because it's hard in your 30s to lose weight. I'm trying it right now. It's rough going.
I'll keep that in mind, John, when I get there. I'll keep that in mind. I got some time left, so I'll keep that in mind.
You got any more questions, Greg?
Geez, I guess. So you said that you got started just doing some groundwork as a customer service representative, right?
Yeah. I was on the phone answering phone calls. Thank you for calling Chase. My name's Terril Tyson. Can I get your loan number, please? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I really I would like to get involved in that sector. I'd like to be involved in banking and finance. That type of stuff is really interesting to me, and I'm really math oriented. But I've noticed that a lot of especially at the larger banks, if you're applying for these analyst internships or these opportunities that they have to be like a junior analyst, it's very highly competitive.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice of, I guess, if you can't get in the door through that way, maybe because you're like me and you went to a smaller college, what are some other ways that people get their foot in the door at these type of businesses?
So first of all, that's a fantastic question. That's a very nice question. Because you're right, those analyst roles it's high competition. Ironically, when I was on my business intelligence analyst team, there's actually someone who was part of that analyst program. She had kind of made it in, and she had done multiple cycles on different teams and ended up being hired on our team full time. But as you mentioned, it's kind of like the Hunger Games out there. You got a lot of people to kind of get past to that point to win that Plymouth Prize. But I would say that the way to get in the door kind of got one or two ways. The first one is the good old adage, not what you know, who you know. So if you do know someone who perhaps is that can help from a referral standpoint, that may help from here's an opportunity standpoint. But then also I'd say a willingness to do just that, get your foot in the door. So to be honest, was being on the phone the most glamorous start? No, it was not. But am I grateful for it? Yeah. I learned a lot about the business because the training class I went to was part of it before we talked about what to do on the phone, just the basic of mortgage. So I got to learn about coming out of high school. I didn't know nothing about mortgage. I know people pay them, but I don't know how it actually works. And so going that route was great for me to actually learn the business. How does this actually work? So then by the time I got to the analyst role, I understood it. I knew what the numbers meant. I knew how they correlated and tied to. So I think a big part of getting the foot in the door sometimes can also be, are you willing for the delayed gratification of maybe it's a role that isn't the most glamorous, isn't the most fun, but you can at least get in. And to your point, work hard, show your value, talk to different people while you're within. Because see, once you're in, you're in. It's a lot easier to kind of move you around to get to know people once you're in. Because you're already in the system, you already work there. It's a lot easier to say, hey, I have an opening for this team. Would you like to be a part of it? I know you've expressed interest in this type of work. It's a lot easier when you're already there. And obviously, you're already doing your stuff. You have the degree, you have the skills, you have the abilities. You already are showing the potential now to be an analyst tomorrow, right? You already have that in the bag. There's no doubt or question about that. You know, looking at your portfolio project earlier, you know what you're doing. That's not much of a question. It's just about, can you get in the door to where now the people who need to know that can know that and say, okay, yeah, we can move him here. Hey, he's been on phone or some other role for a year or two. He has the experience in addition to the degree, in addition to the skills, in addition to the drive. Let's plug him in here. I think patience is a big key in being willing to take on different jobs that at the time may not always fit what you would like, because to be honest, you already have some of the things that sometimes people in those roles don't have, which prevents them from getting out. Sometimes people want to get out of those roles, but they may not have the degree or they may not have the skills, and now they're trying to find the time to do both those things, and it doesn't always work. You already have that. So you getting there to begin with is already a clear stepping stone. Like, you already know you're not going to just sit there because you've already done the other work of learning skills, getting a piece of paperwork, degree. Like, you already got all that. So you're more so just waiting your time versus some people get there and now they're like, I figured it out, but I don't have the time to build what I need to get there. Does that kind of make sense a little bit? Hopefully. Maybe?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I totally know what you mean. It's like you said, you got to get your foot in the door. It's just, you just got to get your foot in the door and work your way up.
Because it does work. I've met people. I mean, the people who want to move do stand out. I remember my phone team I was on. We were on the night team. We were 12-9. Then we got moved to 10-7, eventually 8-5. But looking back at that team, there were a handful of us who were working extra hard, who were standing out. I moved into the analyst role I was in, and eventually now I manage. But I know other friends of mine who ended up becoming managers on the phones and also got in other roles after that. They all came in because we came in droves on the phones. There was like 3 classes all in the same summer that we all kind of came in. But there were a handful that did separate and then end up moving to different spots. So it can happen. It just takes time. That's all.
All right, I'm having an urge to put Craig in the hot seat right now. So All right, so I got to ask this interview question. Is it better to be on time and good or late and perfect, Craig?
It's better to be on time and good, probably. I think in the world of business, a lot of things are really fast. When I was a freshman in college, for about a year, I worked as a manager at an Airbnb company. So I managed a group of cleaning ladies, and we had like 10 apartments, and I didn't own the bit, but I was like a regional manager, I guess. And a lot of business opportunities come and go really fast. And if you're in a really competitive industry, sometimes it's like there's 4 people and they want this job, and it's whoever shows up first. I've also learned that a lot at my internship when it comes to really big contract work and that type of stuff. I spent a lot of time working with some of the people that do business development, and being right there on time when it happens is sometimes more important than having the better offer. It's just being the first person to get their attention and say, I can do the job. So yeah, I would say being on time.
That was a pretty good answer right there, John. He's ready for the interview. He's ready to go.
Right. I'm sorry. That was like a low key flex of mine because we talk about interviewing and like telling the story. And Craig, I mean, that was. I feel like you should be teaching.
He knocked out the park. He got it.
We need careers in business needs to be taught by Craig.
I'll accept the position if it's opening up.
Terell, so do you have any feedback on that?
No, I mean, I agree. I think perfectionism, being a perfectionist can be your greatest ally or biggest downfall. And I know for myself, I've had those moments. You know, on time and good is better. And I remember having moments, especially when I first started, where I just didn't feel it was perfect. I just didn't feel it was right. So I tell my man, it's another day, another week, another month. And then by the time I got it perfect, the needs disappeared. It's not relevant. No one's talking about it. And I completely missed the window to deliver something, right? As opposed to it looks like, Terell can't get nothing done really. It takes him forever and it doesn't get done. That's what it looks like versus, oh, this was great. So you're 100% correct. Deadline's Friday. Get something in by Friday. We can always reiterate. We can always keep working. Progress over perfection. So, no, I agree with that because sometimes holding on to it too long is a habit we all have to fight because when you hold on too long, people move on. Their attention goes somewhere else. We don't care about that project anymore. We've already moved on. You moved on, Craig, 3 weeks ago. What are you talking about? Get that out of my face. And you're like, but I worked so hard. But to your point, should have been on time and good for that matter.
And I for those listening, I promise we didn't like script this because Craig, I want to break down like what you did so well. So like number one, you got the question right. It's usually you want to be on time. If it's 96% accurate, that's good enough to make a decision. But then also you went into like your past history, thought critically about the question and told a very cohesive story. So not only did you get the question right, but then you showed proof of a past experience that shows that, hey, if I were to take on this position, I understand that there's probably a lot of ambiguity and I don't need a crystal clear vision or marching orders to move forward. My current manager actually said that they let somebody go in a similar position as that I'm in because they wanted basically a recipe, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And that just doesn't fly. Like you've got to swim on your own or you're going to be kind of sinking the boat.
Right. Yeah. I think when it comes to interview questions, it's not always necessarily about even having the same answer that the person asking you wanted you to say. But you want to give them an answer and then you want to show them that you can think critically and why you have that answer. And I think when you're interviewing somebody, if I was interviewing for a new cleaning lady at that time or something with my family business, they're interviewing for a new position. The most important thing is showing that you're a person that is flexible and you can just learn something new. Because just like with Terell, I mean, you got hired to do working on the phones, but if you're a type of person that can think really well, we'll put you to work doing something else. And I think that's the philosophy that's really that's high currency, being able to think in the modern world. So
it is. It's underrated. It sounds simple, right? That you should know how to think, but it's unfortunately, that's a skill that we don't all develop. Being able to critically think and create something new, to work with something that's ambiguous. Sometimes we always want it laid out step for step, and there are jobs for that. But the jobs that you want may not always be that job. It may not always be put burger this way. Like, you may need to do something else as well.
All of those jobs are going to be replaced by AI, because AI can do that. It can follow the recipe, and just do that over and over again. So, Terell, do you have any, what questions stumped you as far as the interview goes? Like, did you have any? Because you know what? Let me tell you how I answer that question. So, I immediately asked, I was like, well, what's the context in which you're talking? Which was just buying me time to think about it.
Mhm.
And then I said, well, because if I'm paying the IRS, I want it to be accurate, because I don't want to have them knocking on my door. But if I need a product chipped, it's good enough. Which arguably, I mean, I don't know, Craig, you might have had a stronger answer for that than I did.
Yeah, I mean, even the IRS lets you file for an extension. So.
I did that this year, but I do that every year.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was thinking about it in terms of different use cases, but you told us an anecdote that you just had off the top of your head, which is really, really impressive. I feel like most people are really nervous in interviews, and they're actually probably smarter than they come off in the interview setting, because it's like a first date. Yep. It's like nervous, weird energy, which I've realized I've kind of developed a superpower, because being on this podcast, I've been talking to people, like, you're a VP, like, who am I to be talking to you? And also you throw in the, it's live, and I'm trying to manage that, and I want to make sure that, Craig, you're not bored and you're getting the most out of this. So I'm used to that. But most people, they don't have to sell themselves, or they don't have to communicate, or they don't have to deal with, that anxiety. So I think that's a pretty interesting point.
No, it is. And to your point, John, I can't think of any question that has stumped me in particular.
Okay.
I try my best to anticipate certain questions and gaps that will exist, right? So gap for me, education, gap for me when I left my prior job it's only been a year, why are you leaving right now? So I try to anticipate what way stump me, so that way I can have a ready answer. The only thing that's ever stumped me would be things that I just don't know, like I literally don't know how to do, in which case you just have to be honest and say, nope, haven't done that, but I'm willing to learn it. Those are probably the only questions that may have stumped. I think when I left Chase to go to Caliber, someone asked me if I knew how to create databases, and I'm like, I haven't done that before, but I'm willing to learn. Right? It stumped me. I wasn't going to try to make something up, so I was stuck. But I'll be honest instead of lying. I'm gonna be honest here.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is if you lie in the interview, you kind of dig your own grave. Yep. Because it's like you lie about being competent, and then you get on the job and you can't. Maybe you could. Yeah. Well, I will say that I will caveat this a little bit in that I spent 8 years consulting, and I would pitch clients that I knew 80% of what I was talking about, and then I had to fill in that other 20%.
Sure.
But I didn't flat out lie. I'm the leading expert in XYZ, and then all of a sudden it's you don't even know how to do the fundamentals, which I think actually happened in a role similar to mine, where somebody got let go within the first month, and I think they just because some people are really good at bullshitting and coming off a certain way, but then there's nothing to kind of back that up. In fact, I think you want to be the opposite. You want to be understated, and then that way you're over delivering or exceeding expectations.
Under promise, over deliver, not
over promise,
under deliver. Right. That's the next question, Craig. Which one's better? But we already gave the answer.
Well, speaking of delivering, Craig, you want to go ahead and pull up your portfolio?
Sure.
Yeah, because we started to get into the specifics of it, pre podcast recording. I was like, no, save this. This is we should capture this.
So what you should be seeing is on my Maven Analytics portfolio that you can find on my LinkedIn. I've got a couple other things on there. This was done in Power BI, and it is based on a Lending Club loan data that I might also be able to share, but it is just a giant Excel spreadsheet with loan data from about 5 years. So yeah, this is a Power BI dashboard that I made. I tried to keep some of the core principles of making a dashboard. So it should be visually attractive, and I'm hoping that everything on here looks really simple and easy to understand. I broke all of this loan data down in essentially two different ways. The first way was I did a text comparison of user input in order to try and get an idea of where their market base is, like who is actually applying for these loans. And then I also broke down from a more technical perspective the loan grade and the loan subgrade. And then I did an analysis of that to say, hey, maybe here's some ways that we could have improved and made the business more efficient. So other than my overall dashboard, breaking down the user input that they put in when they're filling out to apply for a loan, and then making a nice word cloud and some really good looking charts here. You can tell that one of the biggest sources of people using Lending Club is for debt consolidation purposes. Mm-hmm. It's way up at the top, and it's over twice the market cap of credit card, I guess, which is people just trying to pay off their credit card loan and get a lower interest rate. Lower interest rates are everything nowadays. So, and I thought that was really interesting because that's relevant information to know if that is the type of business that you are running. You want to know exactly why people are filling out for loans. And of course, I thought all of this was also interesting to look at from the perspective of seasonality. So breaking different things down by month, you can see that just about all the time, debt consolidation and credit card is at the top, but the other stuff can change from month to month. And from the overall dashboard, it seems really obvious what's going on here. People are buying stuff on Black Friday.
Right.
So it also gives you a really good idea of what particular times are important times for you to really focus on running everything properly in your business and knowing this is when we need to make the most money. See if I can control click to get rid of that, get back to the full year. And then this was a breakdown from their loan grade. So each loan was assigned a grade, A to G, and then a subgrade, A1 to A5, all the way to G5. Breaking them down by just regular loan grade, you can see that C grade loans comprise the largest portion of their actual revenue, not only because that's where most individuals in the United States just happen to fall. Not everybody has an amazing credit score, but also because lower grade loans have higher interest rates and they make you more money. And so they're always trying to optimize for that sweet spot of the lowest grade that we can give that person to get the most interest out of them, but also we want them to pay it back. And you can see that as the loan grade gets lower, they stop giving money to people. So they're doing something right there.
Yeah, I like this. This is
yeah.
First and foremost, I like the design of each of the pages that you have. Number two, I thought you did a really good job explaining it. It was a nice, polished explanation. I think you did a great job hitting on the business relevance of it, the business use case for it, right? I think that tends to be the biggest thing with portfolio projects and you showcasing your skills. It's very tempting to show, here's the coolest chart I can make it the visit of the day, look at all what I can do. But in reality, it's keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS is the acronym that I always love to use because you want this to be read by someone higher up. Keeping it the simplest is going to make it the easiest on the cognitive load. They're going to be able to read it, understand it quickly. I thought your not recommendations, but you're summarizing the different boxes with the text and everything. I think that's a great observation, which is really helpful too, because now you start getting into the why. I think the seasonality is really nice on this as well, being able to see which month and you get to see the trend. You know, you mentioned it clearly. Black Friday things are spiking, but that's still good to know because to your point, you know, to run your business the best during this time. Like, we can't have slippage, we can't have problems. We need all hands on deck, and that's the type of reporting you want to have. It drives the business to make an action, and I think you did a really good job of capturing what actions need to be taken in this dashboard. So no, this is a nice project, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is really good. This is well thought out.
Yeah, thank you. This was one of the first projects that I really did with a large data set in Power BI. I made this about a year ago, and the data set for this, I think it was about 60 or 70 columns and a lot of rows, 500,000 or 600,000 rows. Fortunately, I have a nice enough laptop with a nice graphics card, but I recall trying to open that file one time on one of my school computers, and it just crashed the computer because it was like a gigabyte or something. So this was a really good practice point for me, not only just to have a nice portfolio piece, but also figuring out how to break down really, really large data sets where the trends are not immediately obvious, even just from scrolling through the data.
Right.
I think that ability is something that's really important, especially like with really large companies, but also even for small business. Oftentimes businesses will, even if it's just credit card receipts, they'll have thousands and thousands of them. And so it can be really hard to actually put all that together and figure out the trends and say, how can I come up with an action to improve the profitability of my business? So this was a really good exercise in that for me. And particularly this last screen, breaking it down by sub loan, or I guess the sub rating of the loan, was particularly interesting because I found that this is the biggest spot where you can see inconsistencies in their loan grading system. And I thought that this was probably the biggest insight that I got out of this whole data set, was that there are very obvious points, like around the loan grade B5 to C1, where you can see that something in their system means some of these B3 and B4 people need to be downgraded to B5 because they're not properly optimizing to get the highest interest rate on their loans. And that's why this is not a perfect bell curve like you would expect. So
that's a good eye.
I thought this was this, and I've got a couple other projects on my Maven that you can find on my LinkedIn if anybody ever wanted to look at them. But I really thought that this was a great exercise for me when I was first learning Power BI, for sure.
No, this is, I like the way you're thinking is the right way, Craig, to be honest with you, because a lot of times in analytics, we have a bad habit of sometimes focusing on tools to like a hyper extent, where we only talk about tools and we never talk about the business. And I think your mind, and no doubt it comes from you helping with your family small business. So you're used to the idea of looking at things through the business lens, but that will take you far, far away and far up as you move throughout your time, because that's the type of thinking that you have to have. Like, this word cloud is great. Consolidation debt. What is the main thing? Now we know. So we know we need to keep, whether it be marketing to that, whether it's making sure we have customers who fit that, whatever it is, we know. And you're bringing that up. I think, yeah, great project, a great outcome. I like this. Nice.
So Terell, you think if he, so this was his final, by the way. So in my case,
I hope you got a good grade.
Which, I mean, to bring up a point, I think if he got an A on the exam, maybe that'd be a little bit more impressive in an interview setting.
They didn't give him an A. What they give him?
No. I'm saying I'm kind of poking at education.
I know what you mean.
That like, I'm a straight A student. It's like,
right.
want. So what? To where this, like, Craig, what you've developed, and it's been fascinating to watch you develop this, is I think you've gotten even better at putting together a cohesive narrative and telling that story. That is so powerful. And I feel like a lot of senior analysts probably aren't super great at that.
No, not at all. I think that's what misses the most in our field, if you will, in analytics, because analytics applies everywhere, right? We're talking about it specifically in the banking sector, but it doesn't matter if you're banking, if you're in television, if you're in food, there's someone doing analytics somewhere. We have too much data now. It's 2024. Yeah. Data's everywhere. There's someone analyzing it. And you're right, John. A lot of senior analysts can struggle with the communication piece, the narrative piece, and that can hold a lot of things back, because if you do get the chance to talk to an executive, you get the chance to talk to the VP of this, you get the chance to talk to someone about what you're doing, but if you don't articulate it well, it's going in down the chute, right? This doesn't help me, get rid of it. Like, it's gone. That's it. And now you're like, you worked hard. It probably could have been helpful, but because we didn't sell it properly, now it's gone. And you did a great job of again, selling that and presenting that. I think that was really nicely done.
Well, the reason I'm laughing is I'm laughing at the thought that came to my head. You kind of have to treat senior leadership like they're kindergartners. Like
that's exactly what I was about to say.
This is good. You want more of that, I mean, you're not going to like put that tone out there, but they're looking at the macro view of what's going on. And it's like, are we going this way or that way? And if you were like, well, if you look at my statistical model, like their eyes are gonna glaze over and they're gonna look at you like you're speaking Martian or something. So, and that's like dialing up the granularity of what you're talking about, because at the high level, let's root down on pricing optimization. At the high level, you're telling the executive we're increasing or decreasing the price.
Yep.
But going down to, senior analysts, it's like, okay, well, what makes up the pricing decision? Well, there's elasticity. There's also, what about our sub-demographics? Like, do we have zone pricing like that? And then down to the core level, it's like, all right, should we build a slope model, regression, blah, blah, like the higher up you go, the more, like if I'm being cute and I'm talking about what I did in my consulting, it's like I make picture books for influential adults. Like it's like you just point here, So cool. Greg, you got any other questions?
I suppose not. I totally agree with your point, like you were saying about you're making picture books for influential people, for sure. Because I think something that was a hard thing for me to learn that I learned a lot about in my internship was you might be really technical, but when you're talking to the person that's the next up in the chain, they probably don't even have a need to know how to use whatever software you're using. They might understand conceptually what it does, but it's important to get to the point and not get lost in the details of this software says or does this. So yeah, I think that's really important. And I think developing like the speaking skills and the presentation skills to just get to the point and kind of be able to gloss over your technical ability, even if you have a lot of technical ability, but being able to look past that and find the main point, that's really important to like the information that people really need to know. I think that's a difficult skill to learn. So
it is difficult because you work hard to develop a technical skill, right? I mean, you don't work hard to develop a skill and you're not proud of it and you don't want to tell everybody and show everybody. You're like, you want to see what I can do? Look what I can build. It's incredible. But to your point, you have to have the awareness of the situation, awareness of who you're talking to, awareness of, do I need to do high level or granular, and then adjust accordingly. Because that's going to be more important and frankly more impressive, because then if you hit the right note, well, now everyone's happy and we're all high-fiving later that, oh, that was a great project, great presentation. It went great for you. We write it in your end-of-year review and everybody's happy versus, I'm showing off my technical skills and your manager says, hey, next time, just tell them what time it is. Don't tell them how that you make the watch, right? And then you have to have that whole conversation. So, no, totally agree.
All right, Terell, you got to go in 10 minutes. So let's end on this note. Correct, because you mentioned like LinkedIn and like social media stuff. LinkedIn is what is the parable about? They're in a cave and they're focusing on their shadows. Like LinkedIn is so far. I've talked to multiple people in my company, and none of them are on LinkedIn. They have a LinkedIn profile, but they're not posting actively. What I wanted to kind of get across is that being super technical or super complex in what you're doing is high status among other analysts, but it doesn't go up the ladder. So, because you brought up a point in our pre-podcast talk about something about analytics and the social media trends.
Yeah, I think I've noticed in my personal, and maybe it's because my algorithm just knows that I'm getting into the analytics space, but I've noticed that on Twitter and Instagram and some of these social media spaces, there is starting to be a rise of influencers who their entire product that they're selling to the people clicking like is that they do really good analytics. There's people that they are great at breaking down the sports betting data and they come up with all these really good picks and they make really nice charts and graphs, but it's just analytics is what they're doing. And that's becoming really popular. Some of these people have millions of views. It's also in the political space. For a long time, people have been hearing about this poll and that poll, but there's people that can really take all the government data and really break it down and analyze it. And they'll make these Twitter mega threads that get 50,000 likes, 100,000 likes. And I think just among people in general, there's starting to be more of a market in the social media space for people that are good at analytics and good at thinking like that.
So on that note, I literally just had this conversation. So Solomon, my mentor, he built out a visualization that hit the front page of Reddit looking at campaign finance data. And what was interesting from his perspective is that because we were talking about social media and like growing a following, and it's like, if you're working in analytics, you probably don't want to be a data influencer. Like a lot of people, they work for a year or 3 years or 5 years, and then they become full-time influencers, but they're not working in the space. So there seems to be a really big kind of divide of the people who are creating content over and over and over again about breaking in the space and doing this and doing that. At the end of the day, they're just trying to extract as much money from people who are not in a great position, which I feel morally outraged on some level.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what you're trying to accomplish, right? Like, if your goal is to use social media to make money, then it behooves you to do what gets clicks and views, right? You need it to go viral to get the attention. You need it for that reason. If you're using LinkedIn more so from a social standpoint of here's who I am as a professional, you connect with other professionals, and that helps with that aspect, it can be used for that. I think it really just depends on what is it exactly that each individual would want. But to your point, John, right? It's easy to say, I made $20,000, now I make $180,000 with this boot camp. Give me X amount of money, and then we'll do the same for you. And that is unfortunate that happens. I think it reflects, we live in an environment where people try to manipulate and take advantage. And just like you had back in the day, different ways to scam money, you have the internet to help you do that now.
Yeah, it's the Nigerian print scam just with extra steps now.
Right, exactly. And you can do that. I think over time, though, it tends to separate. You see, okay, who actually is a professional in the space, who actually knows what they're talking about in the space. Because like you said, John, everyone's not on there. The amount of people who are actually all on it versus who are and aren't is very small. And even those who are on it, there's only a small percentage are actually active, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's not necessarily active who is on it. There's plenty of people I know who are top executives and they're not necessarily active on it. They're on it, but they're not really doing a whole lot. So, you just have to separate and decide who do you want to be in that space.
Yeah, well, I think like with the exception of Elon Musk, most people who are in a high influence position want to keep a low profile because it's risky. Because like what I'm noticing on like YouTube and all the other social media platforms is that influencer after influencer, there is like a whole swarm of people trying to cancel them.
Sure.
So they're like, and it's stress. It was weird because like, a year ago, I hired a writer to help write my content. And, I think I probably got 1 million impressions, but then the amount of negativity that came with that was just it sucked. And it was coming from all directions. And I mean, it really impacted my mental health to where I was like, what am I, I've made a few $100,000 through LinkedIn. Yeah. From LinkedIn Learning and then selling my career services program. But I don't know. It just feels weird. It's like 2010s Instagram culture.
Right.
Now it's like, look at me. I'm awesome. This is what I've done. My advice for LinkedIn is just make sure it's almost like your LinkedIn profile is your dating profile. It's like your Bumble or your Tinder. So it's like, and you got to keep in mind, like, you want people like Terell in mind. Like if he's on LinkedIn and he's looking at candidates he might hire, what's going to impress him? What's going to move the needle and make his job or his life easier?
And that's true. I'd agree with that. You attract what you put out. So
right.
if you're attracting the viral things and you're trying to just get impressions, which again, let's just say you have a positive motive for wanting tons of impressions. Impressions ideally equal eyeballs. Eyeballs perhaps opportunity. But to John's point, are they the right eyeball? So
Right.
if you're trying to attract, so like, for example, the dashboard you had is fantastic. Hey, here's my dashboard. Here's what you can do for your business. That's fantastic because that's someone who's a business mind. You saying, hey, here's this hot trend and look at this data and it's so cool. I probably don't need that because I'm working in finance. That doesn't mean anything to me necessarily. So to John's point, right, you try to cater to the audience that you want to attract and interact with those who fit that as well. Because John, like he mentioned, I've interacted with his stuff, but I found him through another, I think, connection of mine that may have been a guest on it. Like somehow I found his stuff, but the point is, it was because it aligned to what I valued and what actually mattered to me, and that's the key: staying true to yourself amidst the influx of what the internet wants to say or make it seem.
If you want a good example of what not to do, is there's a subreddit called LinkedIn Lunatics. I'll just drop that there and go look at it. It's baffling. It's fascinating, but it's like, because you're not posting anonymously, like your face and your identity and your manager or boss can see that.
Oh yeah, but that's the difference, right? We were talking earlier about getting your foot in the door in a company and moving forward versus just staying there. It's all of this is a part of it. To your point, John, someone is going to see this. Do I want this to be my reputation, my brand? Is this what I want to be associated with? But to your point, some people don't care, and unfortunately, that can have more negative impacts than what people think. Because as you get in these different companies, they do the background checks, they scrub all your information. If there's nothing crazy, it doesn't matter. Life goes on. But if there's tons of other crazy things, kind of like, hold up a minute. This person might embarrass us. Wait, let's think about this hire. 1 second.
We need to implement LinkedIn timeout. Like you're in LinkedIn jail. Like that was beyond the pale. But all right, you got to leave in a minute. So Terell, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like this has been years in the making of us engaging and talking. And I'm so glad that I get to hear your story. And I feel like you gave a ton of great advice for Craig.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I hope so. It was an honor being on, and I hope, Craig, it can be helpful to you. And you got my LinkedIn now, so you need anything, any information, questions outside of this, hey, I'm here. I am not an influencer. I am not.
I super appreciate it.
I will respond very quickly. I do not have tons of people in my DM, so I'm here.
Yeah.